That was an amazing panel. So many great ideas about intentionality. And now I'd like to, it's just so great to be celebrating this decade of progress, and I'm especially thrilled to be part of this breakfast because we are honoring Ken Frazier. Last year we lost Shelley Lazarus and we were down to 3, and through Ken's leadership, we immediately doubled the board from 3 to 6 women. We all know that the real measure of any board or organization is impact in delivering results. And that's why our next panel is focused on something very specific: how women at the top have innovated and delivered for their companies during this incredibly challenging time. The title, aptly, is Disruption Demands Innovation and Agility. So please welcome to the stage Mary Barra, Chair and CEO of General Motors and Director, Walt Disney. Linda Rendell, CEO of the Clorox Company and Director of Visa, Inc. Maggie Wilderotter, Chair of DocuSign, as you just heard, Director of Costco, Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, Lyft, and Sana Biotechnology. Mike Wirth, Chair and CEO of Chevron. And to moderate the discussion, Pat Russo, Chair of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and Director of GM, Merck, and KKR. Welcome, Pat.
Well, good morning, everyone. I first want to say congratulations on all the great progress that's been made. While there's still more work to do, I think it's always important to pause and say we've come a long way. And I would also like to say I am absolutely thrilled to have the opportunity to moderate a discussion with such an outstanding group of leaders, all of whom I know. So as Pam said, you know, we're going to talk about disruption demanding innovation and agility. And what I'd really like to do is, obviously we have CEOs, board members, former CEOs, and we've all, you know, representing a wide range of industries and companies. And I think, you know, it's true for all of us. We've all lived through disruption in our professional careers, back to the global financial crisis, technological dislocations, regulatory dislocations. I mean, there's been a lot of disruption over the years. I think it is fair to say that 2020 and the pandemic, the impact of that just touched not just our professional lives, but all of our personal lives. And so I think that, and some companies were advantaged, some companies were disadvantaged. And so it'd be really interesting to hear from these folks what they did, how they led, and I would ask you to particularly weave in how gender and diversity around your board table or in your leadership teams really made a difference. So let me start, Mary, with you. As you all know, I serve on the GM board, so I had an opportunity to watch Mary as she navigated the impact. But GM has over 50% of its board is women, so congratulations on that. But Mary, why don't you talk? Thank you. Why don't you share a little bit, Mary, about, you know, the disruptions GM felt the most, how you had to pivot, what changes you had to make, and what role, you know, women around the table had in that process?
Sure. Well, I think for everybody it was quite a year. I have to say, though, on our representation, Pat was the head, or still is the head of our Corp Gov, but also our lead director. So she's been a true partner in building our board. So I do have to give Pat that strong recognition. But like everyone, you know, when you get a call, you figure out within a course of a week you've got to get everyone working from home, and then, you know, shutting down your factories, and then, you know, the minute you shut them down, figuring out how you're going to get them back safely, because we prioritized our people, our customers, and then looked at the company, made sure we had a balance sheet that could support a very unknown future. But then we immediately went back to General Motors' roots, which was how do we serve our country? And we make things. And so Ken Chenault, got a call from Ken Chenault about could we help a small ventilator company that was making about 250 ventilators a month, and we scaled them within 30 days from the first meeting, which was 2 days after Ken called. 30 days later, we were building ventilators in Indiana, scaling to 10,000 a month that about 100, I think it was 150 days later, we had built 30,000 ventilators. And so leveraging the entire company, and it was one of those things where if I had ever said to the team, how fast can we build a ventilator? They would have been like, oh, I need 2.5 years. They did it in a month. And one of the interesting things about it was the parts, we knew that we needed a new supply base because a lot of the constraints Ventec was facing was just their suppliers couldn't keep up. We went to the automotive supply base and they took the call to action. So, but what we learned from that, and I think it was a message of empowerment. We didn't have a bunch of reviews. The only calls, we put one person in charge, the whole company knew it was a priority, and they called us when they needed roadblocks busted. And everybody just jumped in and wanted to be a part of it. And I think that type of empowerment is so important, because right now we talk about doing things in the company at ventilator speed, but we also talk about letting the people who are closest to it, who know how to get the work done, and empower them to move forward. And what that's really helped at General Motors is uncovering tremendous talent across the company, a lot of it diverse talent. Because we, like the panel that talked before, anytime we promote to executive or senior executive, we require a diverse slate. And if there isn't a diverse slate, we don't want one made up. I say, okay, what will it take in 3 years to have a diverse slate for this position? And so through managing through all the ups and downs and unknown of what we faced really allowed us to uncover a lot of talent, and we've actually increased the number of women executives in the company over this period.
Thanks. And Maggie, let's talk. You obviously have seen everything from Costco to Lyft to DocuSign. In the case of DocuSign, I think DocuSign became one of the more popular capabilities. So on that front, you had certainly a lot of opportunity. Why don't you talk about how the company stepped up, and then comment a little bit about the effect on Lyft, and which was the opposite, of course.
Yeah. The title is about disruption, right? But disruption can go both ways. Right. Disrupting your business model with a barrage of business, and then also the disruption of when you lose market share overnight. I mean, Lyft lost more than 80% of its market share in 2 weeks, right? People just weren't going to go get in cars and go anywhere. So having to pivot in that kind of a situation really required the board to not just lean in, we were laying on the table, right? So, what are we going to do? How are we going to survive? Do we have enough money, right? We have to go raise money. What are we going to do about the workforce? And what are we going to do about our drivers? So we would get more operational in that kind of an environment as a board to try to help our two co-founders, who were a bit like deer in headlights, right? They'd never seen anything like this, to really pivot and do things differently. And Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, where Pat and I serve on the board, they were also stressed by the supply chain issues, right? It's like Mary said, you make stuff, you have to have the ingredients to make it. And that was a real bottleneck for HPE as well. Then I shift over to DocuSign, right, which we affectionately in the boardroom call it DocuLove, right? Because what happened is digital transformation took off in every organization. It was no longer about cutting costs, it was about competitive advantage. And Dan Springer, our CEO, who's here today, and as chairman of the board, we were partnering with our board to figure out how do we change our strategy. We had a specific strategy we were doing, and we pivoted totally to the e-signature side, because that's what customers were demanding. So sometimes you have to disrupt what you were planning on doing and shift an organization to do things differently. But also the disruption is when you're wildly successful and you're just answering phone calls and filling orders. It's very different than when things start to go back to normal. How do you pivot again?
Right.
To get the workforce really leaning in, to get your sales force out there really selling value. So you have those kind of pivots that happen. And then last but certainly not least, I'm on the Costco board. You know, Costco is an amazing company. And Costco innovated throughout the entire pandemic. We never shut down. We were considered an essential service. So our warehouse folks were working. And the corporate office in Seattle, Craig Jelinek, who's our CEO, 38-year employee of Costco, he's 69 years old. And he said, if our warehouses are working, our corporate office is working. So they never left the office. And they were there every single day. We're now in the container ship business. We own container ships. We own the containers. We've never had those conversations at the Costco board meeting before, but now we do. We wanted to control that supply chain because all of you needed toilet paper and paper towels. And then we put things like senior hours in place, where people that were 60 or older could come in an hour before the warehouses opened. And because as we all know, people were lining up, and it was like supermarket sweep. And young people could get to the back of the warehouse where the meats and the toilet paper and paper towels were. And the older people, by the time they got there, there's nothing left. So we let them come in early. So there was a lot of pivots and innovation that Costco did to continue to grow and serve the members. But they did it through their employees. The last thing I will say is we have 300,000 employees, many of them hourly. And for all of our employees over 60 years old, they did not have to come to work, and they had full pay and full benefits throughout the entire time. And those who came to work, we paid them hazardous duty pay, anywhere from $2, $3, $4, or $5 an hour more than what they were getting before. And we just took care of our employees and made sure that they could take great care of members by doing that. And if you take retirements out from Costco, our turnover rate is between 4 and 6% in a very disruptive type industry.
And speaking about not being able to get toilet paper, Linda, I remember looking for Clorox wipes. I don't know, anybody else? Anybody else searching for Clorox wipes here? So you came into the CEO job right at the beginning of this, I think, or at least close to it. So obviously, challenges and opportunities. Talk about that. And half of your leadership team, I understand, are women. So talk about, how you ended up with half your leadership team being women and what role they played as you navigated those challenges and opportunities and demands.
Thank you for your patience. Clorox wipes was definitely the hit of the pandemic and continues to be. We're in stock now, so if you need any, good to go.
I have some in my purse.
So do I. We had the tremendous opportunity to serve people around the world during this pandemic. We joke about it now, but we had an incredible opportunity, but it required our company to do things very differently. So in consumer packaged goods, we typically grow single digits year after year, and we had product lines that grew, we had demand as high as 500% versus what we had seen pre-pandemic, and much of our product line, double-digit demand. And so it required us to completely think differently. And it started with, as Mary said, keeping our people safe. More than half of our people show up every single day in manufacturing, and we were asking them to do things they had never done before. And they were the seat of innovation for us. They were thinking about how to run the lines faster, how to get new suppliers on board. How would we bring machines that were being built from Germany when we couldn't get things overseas? How could we work differently and get that done? And so it required an incredible amount of agility, an incredible amount of innovation. And of course, we're still dealing with all of this and what's going on in the global supply chain. We don't own containers, but that's a pretty good idea. And it required the full diversity of our team. So we have a very diverse board. We have over 40% of our board are women. And our management team is 50% women. And what I think that did is it lived our core value. So one of our core values of the three is put people at the center. Put people at the center means we need to put our team at the center and all of those people, and having that diversity means that when people look up, they can say what's on their mind and feel like they have people who represent them. I mean, how many times did I sit on conference calls or video calls where people were watching with my 9-year-old son in my lap crying because he didn't want to be at home anymore for school, and they were able to relate to that and to our whole team. And the consumers we serve are mostly women. And so having that empathy, having that understanding of what our consumers were going through at a point in their lives, the women in a boardroom and our management team asked different questions. They thought differently. They thought about benefits differently. They thought about product mix differently. And so, I would just say that it has caused us to be a much stronger company, a faster, more agile company, and leaning even more into the diversity that we know is so important.
Yeah, interesting point you make, and I learned this when I joined the GM board. More than half of the decisions, what percent of the decisions on vehicles are made by women, Mary?
Over 80%.
Okay, so over 80% of the purchase decisions for vehicles are made by women, and so the board ought to be reflective of the base of decision makers, and initially it wasn't. So that was just such an sort of an aha moment. Mike, I got to spend some time with Mike last evening, and it is really clear how passionate he is about women's participation and diversity in general. And so Mike, you obviously you run Chevron, an energy company. They're not typically thought of as female heavy, so to speak, right? So talk about your thinking with respect to the evolution of your board, what you were looking for, and what a difference the women are making that you've put on the board. I think you have 5 women on your board.
We do. So we've actually got a pretty long history of women serving on our board. Carla Hills was on our board more than 30 years ago. Condi Rice joined our board when she was in her 30s, so very, very young and early in her career. But we didn't have the depth of representation that we should have. And it's really over the last decade, which I think is telling, given the theme and what I've heard mentioned many times this morning, when things have changed for us. So now we have 5 women on our board, all added within the last decade. 2 of them are women of color. 2 of our 4 board committees are chaired by women, and they bring the skills and experience and perspective that makes our company a much better company. So if you'll indulge me, I'll just run through quickly to give you an example. Our longest serving female director is Alice Gast. She's the president of Imperial College in London. PhD chemical engineer, much smarter than I am, and so, expert on Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. And ironically, she interned when she was an undergraduate chemical engineering student for our company. And she now sits on our board. And oftentimes I tell our young women employees, not only can you become the boss, you can become the CEO, you could become the CEO's boss, because that's exactly what Alice has done. Wanda Austin is on our board, former CEO of the Aerospace Corporation, another PhD engineer, literally a rocket scientist, and a tremendous leader, led USC through turmoil and change, and has incredible perspective, depth in STEM and the kinds of things that are very important in our business. Dambisa Moyo, who was on the screen earlier today, born in Zambia, another PhD. There's a theme here, really smart people. And an economist who brings a perspective, has served on many boards, a global perspective on business. Debbie Reed Klages, former CEO of Sempra. She's in energy business, another engineer, and really understands the intersection of energy, economics, politics, and geopolitics, which infuses our business. And then most recently, Marilyn Houston, former CEO of Lockheed Martin, has joined our board. And so another engineer, and understands global complex industries, and again, the intersection of business, geopolitics, all around the planet. And so the perspective that these directors bring to our board is just invaluable. Right. They are not there for any reason other than they're incredibly qualified. And as you go through the turmoil of the last year, they've provided balance, and they've asked the tough questions. And as you're dealing with all the things that every company here dealt with, and we had our own versions of them, as crude oil was priced at a negative number at one point, and demand collapsed, and you have to respond to all these things and keep your people safe. in our industry, there's also a lot of concern about the longer-term impact of energy on the planet. And so you can't just set that aside and say, well, we're going to deal with the pandemic and we'll get to climate later. You actually have to continue to work hard on the longer-term issues that are existential in their nature to your company. And so having a board that can allow you to focus on the near term, but also challenge you to look at the issues that are going to be important as you come through that, because they know you will come through that, has been a great gift to our company, and we would not have made some of the decisions we've made had they not been able to balance that tension through this really demanding period of time.
Yeah, and I think the message here is there really is no shortage of talented, capable women who can be found with the right skills and experience in any industry. And it is about intentionality and conviction. And I've been involved in placing many women on boards through the companies that I've been involved with, and my philosophy has always been, you just do it. You understand the skills and experiences that are needed, you start with that, and you recognize that diverse thinking is absolutely critical. It's not nice to have, it's a must-have. And you can marry that and have really strong slates of women. And I think, Mike, thanks for going through that, because it really is a testimony to what's possible. Let's talk a little bit about, Mary, I want to talk a little bit about the notion of inclusion. And the previous panel talked about it. And look, it is critically important. It is not enough at the board level or at the executive level to find the right women or diverse candidates, but not create an environment where they feel valued and they feel included and they feel they can speak their mind and ask whatever question they want, et cetera. And Mary, you're known now for some bold statements: 0 crashes, 0 emissions, 0 congestion. That's the vision and the mission. And now you've also said you want to be the most inclusive company in the world. Talk about what led you to say that, and what it is you're doing, and how are you measuring it, and how do you feel about the progress, even though it's early?
Sure. Well, I think as we were going through the pandemic, I think we all remember, when we all learned what happened to George Floyd. And at that point, it was just a kind of a personal moment for me where I said, how is this going to change? Because a week later, are we all going to forget and go on with our lives? But how are we going to really start focusing on what we're going to do so we don't have to have this conversation again? And so we put a message, the whole senior leadership team of the company, the top 15 people, we all agreed, but we said we want to be the most inclusive company. But I'm quick to say it's not a title we want to have on our own. We want every company, every institution, every not-for-profit organization to be striving to that, because that's when we really tap in to all the talent. And when you look at, how do you create an environment? Because in order, like I always say, for me to sit here today to be the CEO of General Motors, that meant 25 years ago, somebody was intentional about giving me different opportunities in the company, and maybe taking a perceived risk on putting me in a role that I hadn't sat in every chair for 5 years to be able to do. And so with that intentionality, if we create an environment where everyone can bring their best self to work, that they feel valued, they feel that they have a career path, that's what's going to change. And so I've spent a lot of the last year, frankly, just listening to other people and what in our company we need to change and what do we need to be intentional about. But it starts, and it's not something I can do or the leadership team, it's everybody has to create that environment. And so, we really want to have everyone move along, and it's really, when you think about it every day, how do you make people feel? Do you make them feel included? The person next to you, the person you're working on a project with, the person you have to call for help, do you make them feel valued? Do you listen? Or do you make them feel marginalized? And then I ask our team, I do a lot of what we call super slices, where we'll have about 200 people on teams, and the whole hour is just asking questions. And when I get asked about this, and I do every time I do one of these, I say, look, how many of you have ever felt like you weren't valued? And I raise my hand. I said, how did that feel? It felt horrible. I said, well, why would we want anyone who comes to work trying to do their best to feel horrible? And so we're really trying to make everybody understand it's about everybody being able to bring their best self. Because if they're able to do that, then they shine, they get the recognition, they get the opportunities, and we have a pipeline that is going to, and I think we still should have the breakfast, but it makes a pipeline that we're celebrating success, not still working on how do we solve the problem. And it's the old saying, a lot of it is going to take time because we're focused on people who just joined the company. At General Motors, over 40% of our salaried workforce has been with the company less than 5 years. But how do we grow and provide these environments that they sit in my chair and they're chairman of the board? And that's what we're focused on.
And Linda, speaking about environment, Clorox was recognized by Parity Organization in 2021 as one of the best places for the advancement of women. Say a little bit about the environment you're trying to create and what you're doing that led for Xerox to be judged as being one of the best places.
I think Mary's comments on inclusion resonate with me as well. We can have the right representation, but if people don't feel like they can offer everything they have to, their full and authentic selves in the work environment, then it's not going to actually matter.
Yeah.
And so we've been focused on inclusion for a really long time. As well as focused on development. I feel the same way. If somebody hadn't taken me as a senior sales analyst, the lowest level of a salaried employee at Clorox 20 years ago, and invested in me every step of the way, if our board hadn't invested in me, I wouldn't be where I am. And so our management team is focused on doing just that for women and people of color. We have to look down into the organization across and say, who are the people that we can give stretching assignments to? They don't even feel like they're ready, but we know they're ready, and we know they can take it on. And then how, when they get in that assignment, do they feel like they can bring their full selves, that they can navigate because maybe they think differently, they lead differently. I certainly led differently than many of the people who I took over for. And that was intimidating for me. I experienced many times when people would say, I don't know what to do with you. Oh, okay. I don't know exactly what that means, but what they did is, I don't know how to work under your leadership. It's different than what I've experienced. And what I hope now we have at Clorox is a group of people who don't get that comment anymore, who don't say, I don't know what to do with you. It's instead, wow, I'm inspired by the fact that you lead differently, or it's allowing me to be my full self. So inclusion is incredibly important. Eliminating bias, and that's what we're focused on in training, is also a big lever of that.
Yeah, Mike, you wanted to?
Yeah, so I just, listening to Mary and Linda really reinforces something that I have learned. And our company is one that is populated with scientists and engineers, and oftentimes they went into those disciplines because they were good with numbers and things. And they both use the word feeling. How did you feel? How did it make you feel? Oftentimes people that go into some of these technical disciplines aren't very good with feelings and emotions, and they went into the fields they went into because that's not what I really am comfortable with. And until you can open up those discussions and allow people the room to do that, it's really hard to create an inclusive culture. And I'll tell you, I was having a flashback as we were getting ready to step up onto the stage this morning, because as the only man on a panel with a bunch of really talented women, I feel like an only. And I remember earlier in my career, our chief HR officer, Rhonda Morris, brought me to meet with a group of about 30 of our senior-most women from a part of the company I hadn't spent as much time with. And we went around and did introductions. It was a very friendly audience, but I had butterflies in my stomach. My palms were moist. And I am really uncomfortable here. And I realized it was because I was the only one. And I had this visceral understanding then that if you are an only, it is really, really hard. And following on that, one of the things we've done, and I know that we've got representatives here from Catalyst, and we've been involved with Catalyst for a long time, we took one of their programs called Men Advocating Real Change and kind of evolved it within our company to create what I describe as lean-in circles for men. But we injected women into these discussions and opened up conversations about what it feels like, what women in our company experience. And it was an eye-opener. And it has become something that after people kind of got over the initial trepidation about the conversations, There's tremendous organic pull for this. We have thousands and thousands of employees now that do these things because they want to and because it helps them learn, and it's helped our culture evolve. And so I just think that the issue that both Mary and Linda talked about in terms of creating an inclusive culture, it does take the intentionality that we talked about, and it's so important to get the best out of your people.
Well, and I think it's just a great example of why diversity is valuable and matters. What you just heard from Mary and Linda about feeling, you know, I think women are generally more able to talk about their feelings or tap into wanting to understand what are others' feelings. And so it's, thanks for jumping in. Maggie, we're talking about innovation, and you know, we also are talking about advancing women on boards. Why don't you say a couple of words about the innovation you launched with our colleagues at HPE around boot camp?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank the other members of the panel. You know, you guys are still in those seats running companies, and that's a tough gig, right? And I know as a woman leader, you know, even the first jobs that I had, it was about people that were supporting me to do things I've never done before. I think Mark Twain has a great quote: if you have innovation and ignorance and confidence, success is assured. So I can tell you I had a lot of the ignorance and confidence thing going. But I also think that as we look forward with our boards, and I have the privilege to sit on a number of really great boards with terrific CEOs that are like you in thinking about inclusion and intentionality. But as a board member, I also want to get to know the up and coming talent in the company and spend time with that talent. And so I went to Pat, who's the chairman of HPE, and I said, you know, I've had the privilege to sit on 51 corporate boards in my career. I went on my first board at 28 years old because nobody told me I couldn't do it. And I said, why don't we start to prepare the senior women at HPE to join boards? So I put together a boot camp where we took the top 15 women and we trained them on the work of the board, taking the mystery out of what do the committees do, training them on how to be intentional to get on a board. And then once they're on a board, how to be successful in that first 12 months. And we started this 3 years ago. 70% of those women are now on corporate boards. So we're making really great progress. And I've really taken that boot camp out to other groups. I mean, you've got Diligent in the room and Equilar and several other companies that have sponsored these programs. And I've trained 250 women in the last 24 months on doing boot camps to help them get on boards. And I've put more than 50 women on a corporate board this year alone. And I'm partnering with Brian Moynihan, who's here as well. So. And Brian's intentional. We've got the top 45 women at Bank of America that are in programs with several of the women in this room, including Pat, that are, you know, and you've heard it from Valerie as well. We have a cohort, and my cohort at Bank of America is called the Force, and we are the Force. And I know it's going to be disruptive for Brian as they continue to press for more in the bank, but those are the kind of things that we can do that we can make impact and give back, and be inclusive about what we do and how we do it.
Yeah, and just to pile on there, Maggie utilized the rest of the board at HPE where we assigned each board member to one of these women to help them identify opportunities. And so you get everybody all in. I mean, there's lots of innovation. I mean, is really the point about how to advance this. Let me come back to sort of disruption and how you all led through this. What would you say about what you learned as a result of leading your companies through this experience about what your company could stop doing, what you could do dramatically differently? I know we hadn't talked about this ahead of time, but it strikes me that, you know, this was an opportunity to create change, right? Respond, survive, thrive, look around the corners, reimagine, et cetera. I'm curious, is there anything that after having lived through 18 months, you say, you know what, we don't have to do that anymore, or we could really be more efficient here? I just think it would be kind of fun to share with the audience. Who wants to jump in?
The list is long.
The list is long.
I think that's
okay.
the point. I think the list is long. You know, I'm sure so many of you have these stories. Mary's story on speed on ventilators. I mean, we can go faster. We can make decisions faster. We can get data. We have the data. And that was the learning for us, is there was not one part of what we did that couldn't be disrupted and go faster and get closer to the consumer that we serve. And all doing that while being people-centered. So I think the learning for me is stop taking things for granted. You know, ask the question, are we doing this in the best way? Could we be doing this different? And so we become a culture of question askers. And I think that's the best way to go. Instead of making statements, ask a question, and it's amazing what you get back.
And in the boardroom, I think it's been about saying no as much as about saying yes. What are we going to do and what are we not going to do? And also helping CEOs kind of navigate. This is uncharted water for anybody who's running a company. And having that ability at the board level to support CEOs as they go through tough times and have to make these tough decisions, it changes the dynamic of how the board works together as well.
Yeah, I would just add that, our board, once we got, to the point we knew the safety of our people and our customers, the board challenged us, how do we go faster? How do we're the auto industry, like many, we're in the middle of a transformation. And so how do we move faster? And I think the energy, because what I found that happened in the company through the ventilator project, and many hundreds of people played a small role and are incredibly proud, but others just heard about it. But what it did, it gave the organization a sense of confidence. I can do this. I'm an engineer, and we have a lot of engineers at our company as well, and engineers by definition are somewhat conservative, again, talking about myself, but allowing people to say, well, you just did it here, and they're like, yeah, and that went really well. The confidence they gained through moving quickly and, like you say, leveraging data, but not overanalyzing it, and then the encouragement we got from our board to really move fast, during this time of unprecedented change, became very powerful.
And maybe just a quick one from us. We've been trying to move digital into our business, and it's been slow for a lot of the reasons Mary mentions. We all learned how to do business remotely, but we have facilities, ships, offshore platforms all over the world that people used to feel like they had to go visit to troubleshoot things, to solve problems. We're now using augmented reality, drones, and a whole new set of tools that existed that we were trying to deploy into our business, but have been very slow. But we've all become much more comfortable now with these, the fact that you can really change the way that you do things and use technology very differently. So in addition to a lot of the behavioral things, I think there's some kind of hard aspects of the business that have evolved.
Yeah, and I think coming back to the title, disruption demands innovation and agility, I think for at least all the companies I'm associated with and what you're all describing, there's sort of an awakening to what's possible that none of us thought was possible. I know Mary uses inside GM, look, it's got to be ventilator speed. And so that's a term now that sends a message to people about we've got to do this fast. So a lot of goodness has come out of, a lot of learning has come out of what we've been navigating through over the last 18 months. And I think it'll be important that companies and boards and CEOs figure out how to hang on to what is it that you've learned, what's changed about your thinking and your behavior, so that we don't lose the benefits, not to give short shrift to lots of the challenges. Well, I see 3 zeros in front of me, which basically says you're out of time. I'd just like to say thank you, Mary, Linda, Maggie, and Mike. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.